Environmental protection for sustainable development. Let's begin with the concept environmental protection. So what is the meaning of environmental protection? It refers to any activity to maintain or restore the quality of environmental media through preventing the emission of pollutants, or we can say it is the reducing the presence of polluting substances in environmental media. So the major pollutants are ozone, particulate matters, that is PM10, PM2.5, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide. So what are the problems or the environmental problems created by these pollutants? The major problems created by these pollutants are air pollution, water pollution, toxic chemicals, deterioration of natural environment, ocean acidification, global warming, climate change, and the list goes on. So what are the major causes of these environmental issues or environmental problems? Generally, we can say that urbanization, exploitation of natural resources, uses of chemical pesticides, developmental activities are the reasons for the environmental issues. The studies shows that there are different arguments related to these environmental causes. The two different arguments are whether it is due to the human activity, that is anthropogenic activities, or it is a natural causes. But we have strong proof related to this, that is it is due to the human activity or the anthropogenic activities. So one of the major proof is related to great acceleration. So what is great acceleration? The concept of great acceleration, the Anthropocene journal, the review of Anthropocene reported that the changes in the earth system during the last 30 years is greater than last 50 years. So they consider 24 major variables related to environmental change. So among them 12 are related to natural causes and 12 are related to human activities. So in this great acceleration, the left side shows the socio-economic trends and the right side shows the earth system trends, changes in the earth system trends. So the major socio-economic variables they considered are world population, real GDP, foreign domestic investment, urban population, primary energy use, fertilizer consumption, large dams, water use, paper production, transportation, telecommunication, international tourism. So see the changes in the curve, we can see that there is a huge change during the last 50 years among these 12 variables. This peak point shows the changes in the last 30 years or last 50 years. So this last 30 years peak shows that there is a corresponding changes in the other variables like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, the ocean acidification, like that. So while comparing the socio-economic trends and the earth system trends, we can see that the changes in the last 30 years is very high, and the changes in the socio-economic trends also reflect the or impact the earth system, which is also high in the last 30 years or last 50 years. So there is a clear-cut proof that the changes in the earth system is purely due to the socio-economic trends, that means the human activity or the human impact. Another proof of these changes in the earth system is that the planetary boundaries concept. So it is a set of 9 planetary boundaries with which humanity can continue to develop and thrive for generations to come. So these planetary boundaries is a concept involving the earth process which contain environmental boundaries proposed in 2009 by a group of earth system and environmental scientists led by John Rockstrom from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and will developed by Stephen from Australian National University. The idea of this figure is that the green color shows the safe side of the 9 planetary boundary concept, and the yellow color shows we are in the zone of uncertainty, but that process is increasing. But in the orange color shows we are beyond the safe zone, or we are in the position of uncertainty, beyond the zone of uncertainty. So let's go through the different variables. The green, we are safe in the case of freshwater use, stratospheric ozone depletion, atmospheric aerosol loading, like that. But we crosses the limit in the case of uncertainty situation, in the case of biosphere integrity, then biochemical flows. Again, in the climate change case also we are in the yellow position, and the land system change also we use the very unfair or environmentally unethical situation, that is the land system changes also crosses the safe zone boundaries. So all these shows that we are moving away from the original situation, or we are moving away from the safe zone, and all these are due to human activities or anthropogenic activities. So what are the solution for this? How can we protect the environmental situation? So the purpose of the environmental protection is to maintain and recovering a healthy natural environment. Whenever necessary, we need to protect the particular system, or the idea is to protect the entire planet. So what are the environmental protection measures pursued in different countries? So there are environmental laws, policies and treaties are the major protection measures adopted at the national and international level. So what are the different environmental laws? Laws means there are some environmental related laws, or laws related to the protection of the environment, which may be related to the protection of wildlife, protection of natural resources, particularly forest resources, ocean resources, etc. All these laws are related to environmental laws. So whenever a particular law protect the environmental resources or natural resources, we can say that that's an environmental law. Then what are the policies or the treaties? Policies means whenever we use a particular policy to protect the natural resources or the environmental component, then we can say that it is a environmental related policies. For example, maybe we can use the tax system for the protection of natural resources, maybe in the form of to control the overconsumption. Then we may use the command and control policies. For economic students, they may aware about the Pigovian taxes and subsidies, polluter pay principles. These are the different environmental policies. There are a number of other policies are also existing to control the natural resource misuse. So then another thing is that the treaties. So treaties are the agreements that are developed on the basis of the international conventions. Maybe it's an agreement among group of countries or a group of nations. That treaties are well defined structure or objectives. We should achieve that objectives based on the agreement or the convention principles. The Montreal Protocol principle is a very famous treaty to protect the ozone layer depletion. So these are the major environmental protection measures introduced by different countries in the national and international level. So how much is the level of environmental protection? So it is fundamentally a social, political and ecological question. Basically, a decision to protect the environment affects a large group of people. Similarly, exploitation of natural resources also affects the whole flora and fauna. That's the ecological component. That means there is a trade-off between social justice and conservation. See, for example, in the case of the construction of the dam, the dam construction, what are the benefits, what are the costs, or what are the degradation to the particular system. So in the case of dam construction, there may be the benefits are after electricity, suppose it is for the purpose of production of electricity, after the production of electricity, we may reduce the unit price of the electricity and we can supply the electricity at a reduced cost. But this is one of the major advantages of the dam. So what are the negative effects of the dam? Maybe there is a reduction in the downstream. That means that will affect the downstream population. Suppose they use the water for the agriculture production, then there is a reduction in the total agriculture productivity or the total agriculture production of the downstream population. Maybe there are studies which shows that the construction of dam and the salt water intrusion leads to the health diseases, particularly related to skin diseases. Some health related issues are developed among the downstream populations. So these are the costs related to the dam construction. These are the direct costs. There are other indirect causes. That means the construction of dam may destroy the forest resources, which affects the whole ecosystem. That means we know that the forest are the very relevant, important role to protect the whole ecosystem services. It absorbs carbon dioxide and it gives other resources to the whole, not only to the human beings but also to the other flora and fauna. So when we compare the positive effects with the negative effects, maybe sometimes the positive benefits may be based on the existing calculation. The positive benefits may be higher compared to the negative benefits, but most of the times we do not calculate the negative environmental impacts to the particular system. One of the major problem related to this is that the existing system do not count the whole environmental cost or the whole environmental impact related to. There are measures, we know that there are environmental evaluation techniques, but still we couldn't calculate the entire value, negative values related to the particular dams. So these are the negative effects of a system. So how we decide a particular solution or how we take a policy related to the dam construction. So there are social impact, environmental or ecological impact. Before the other impact is related to the political impact. So the implication to the society or the implication to the whole political system is very high. So the decision making to this particular context is very difficult. So how we reach the particular situation, how we take a particular measure, or how we can continue with the existing system, that's a huge question. Otherwise, focusing on the economic growth without considering these aspects is not feasible for the earth system. So the solution, one of the major philosophical solution for this is the sustainability principle. So what do you mean by sustainability? From the whole analysis we can see that we should consider or the different aspects related to the sustainability are economic growth, conservation and social justice. So a dedicated balance among economic growth, conservation and social justice, we can say that the sustainability. So how do we measure this sustainability, or in which context we say that there is a progress in the sustainability? So the progress can be measured based on the different principles. So when we the progress, simply we can say that the progress depends on the movement of these three different aspects. Suppose there is a delicate balance among economic growth, conservation and social justice, and these three conservation practices or these three aspects we can improve simultaneously, then we can say that there is a progress. So how we judge that progress or how we analyze that progress is a question. There are different principles associated with these aspects. I think the famous, one of the famous principle is 3F's principle, that is finitude, fragility and fairness concept. developed by, there are different articles it is mentioned by these principles, but it's popularly used by Asim Premji in their course. So what do you mean by finitude? See, we know that the resources in the ecosystem or the earth system is finite in nature. So there is a limit to each natural resources, whether it's a water resources or forest resources, or even in the case of air, we can say that there is a limit. So finitude means shows the scarcity of the natural resources. So we can apply the other principles of economics, or how we treat a scarce resources or a scarce commodity. All these principles can be applied to the natural resource. So the other point is that we should also consider other relevant points in the context of finitude, because in the case of natural resources, if we cross a particular point, or if we use the resources in an unsustainable manner and we crosses a particular point or the carrying capacity level of the particular resources, it is very difficult to bounce back to the original situation. That is, we say that it is the irreversibility principle. So we should carefully use the natural resources, and at the same time we consider the finite aspects. Say suppose we say that water is a dynamic concept. Even though water, we treated it as a dynamic in a particular period, the overall water level or the freshwater level in the whole earth system is finite. So we should carefully use the finite natural resource. The second concept is related to the fragility concept. So fragility means the vulnerability of the particular system to overcome a particular shock. So the vulnerability means we can say that natural resources are, if we cross the I have already mentioned that if we cross the carrying capacity, then the vulnerability is very high. So the bouncing back to the original situation is very difficult in the case of natural resources. So we consider the fragility principle also. And the third one is related to the fairness aspects. So generally we use the equity principle to justify a particular context, but in the case of natural resources, it is not suitable to use the equity principle because we can't keep the equity principle by distributing the natural resources and the existing scarce natural resources to keep the equity principle. That's why we follow the fairness principle. So in the fairness means we consider only the current needs of the particular community, whether it is a rich community or a poor community. Based on the particular need or the necessity of the particular situation, we allocate the natural resources. That is the fairness concept. That means we apply the need based principle, that is the fairness concept. So if we follow these principles, we can analyze the sustainability aspect, we can measure the sustainability aspects, whether the particular decision or the particular project or the particular policy is a sustainable one or in other manner. Then from this we can move to the concept of sustainable development. So the sustainable development as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. Actually, this definition is back to 1987 and was devised by a commission set up by the United Nations, that's the World Commission on Environment and Development. This body is generally referred to by the name of the chairperson, that's a woman, and the commission is famously called the Brundtland Commission, and the report of the Brundtland Commission is called Our Common Future, and it is published in 1987. So that's the most widely accepted definition of sustainable development. So the major components of this definition is, first one is the needs of the present generation. So that means the needs of the present generation means a decent life for an ever increasing part of the population. That means each individual need a particular space. The second aspect of the definition is the needs of future generation, that it is a decent society continue to exist for a lengthy period. That means we consider time as an relevant factor. So the sustainable development concept embraces environmental, social and economic objectives to deliver long-term equitable growth which benefits current and future generations. But there are a lot of criticism related to this sustainable development concept. That is one of the major criticism is how we define the time, that is how we define the future generation. What are the needs of the future generation? The needs of the present generation is not matched with the needs of the present generation, the future generation. Maybe we are the need-based theory always stated that it is very difficult to analyze the need of the present generation itself. So the analyzing the present generation needs is a very difficult question. At the same time, we try to assess the future generation's needs. So the needs of the present generation is not matched with the future generation, and it is very difficult to analyze after 40 years needs or after 50 years or 60 years needs. So in that situation, in that case, it is there is a vague concept of sustainability in that definition, and at the same time it is very difficult to measure the concept of sustainability aspects, that is the fairness, finitude or fragility concept in the case of this sustainable development definition. So the basic sustainable development principle, I have already mentioned the 1987 definition. At the same time, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 3rd to 14 June 1992, they developed another document that adopted the name as Agenda 21. This document draws the fundamental principles of sustainable development. Both the documents mentioned above unveil a holistic approach of environmental protection that entails a merger between environmental protection and economic development as circumscribed in the principles of sustainable development. So there is a merger, there is a combination of environmental protection with the economic development. We can say that it is the sustainable development. That's the basic ideology of the sustainable development principle. So in order to overcome the issues in the sustainable development definition, later different theories or different principles are developed to substantiate the sustainability concept or the sustainable development aspects. One of the famous theories is the triple P aspects. The major three primary aspects of the sustainable development are planet, profit and people. So the three, we can see that the pyramid shape picture, the planet and profit we give equal importance or more important, and then we move to the individual concept or the people. So later there is an issue related to the profit aspects, and later that profit is replaced by the concept of prosperity. So the three primary areas of attention for sustainable development, also called the three pillars of sustainability, that is people, planet and profit. Later, during a major UN conference on sustainable development in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2002, it was proposed that profit be replaced with the broader concept of prosperity. So in the concept of prosperity, the definition moved from profit to prosperity. In the case of profit, we may focus on the extractive growth. So that may lead to exploitation. So in order to avoid that concept, we substitute with the concept prosperity. The prosperity incorporates the whole health and well-being of the entire planet. So that is the aspects of the prosperity which incorporate profits also, but at the same time we try to incorporate the whole well-being of the entire system. So the Sustainable Development Agenda, that is the Agenda 21, has led to the conclusion of two fundamental treaties in the environment field under the supervision of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change of 1992 and the 1992 Convention on Biological Diversity. Sustainable development focuses on improving the living conditions of people throughout the world, as well as on intensifying the natural environment, creating a society that can be sustained for a lengthy period. Here also it stresses the long duration or the long period. So the importance of environmental protection and sustainable development, maybe we can justify that importance on the various unsustainable issues or the unsustainable problems faced by the global human system. So this figure shows that there is a interaction or the interlinkages among different issues, whether it is purely environmental related issues or other issues, all are interrelated or interlinked. So let's start with the concept of poverty. So poverty, that concept of poverty is linked with the other aspects, global population growth, overcropping, ozone depletion, aerosols, greenhouse effect, like that, and then that moves to biodiversity reduction, soil exhaustion, then prosperity gap, social exclusion, dictatorship, war, slavery, discrimination, lack of education, child mortality, AIDS, malaria, lack of clean water, poor health care, etc. See, that means all these problems are the problems faced by human beings in the whole world. So these problems are interlinked, or there is an interlinkage among these variables or these aspects. So we try to protect the environmental aspects so that we can achieve the other sustainable development aspects or other variables. So there is a strong interlinkage between environmental protection and the sustainability aspects or the development aspects. So the issues in environmental protection, that means environmental protection problems are a challenge for which there is no single policy, but the combination of existing opportunities and increase of efficiency in all social and economic areas of state would contribute to solving the problem of resources and distribution. So environmental protection is currently a principal area of cooperation and international regulations, which assumes a global or across the borders dimensions. The persistence, purpose and intertemporal nature of environmental problems call for global action or prevention. So this global action or prevention leads to the origin of Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a path of sustainable development can only be charted by the integration of economic, social and environmental aspects and by understanding their interlinkages. Recognizing this, the UN General Assembly in its 70th session in 2015 considered and adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and associated 169 targets for the next 15 years. That is, we have to achieve it in 2030. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, built on the principles of leaving no one behind, came into the force with the effect from 1st January 2016, emphasizing a new agenda that promotes all-inclusive approach for achieving sustainable development for all. So the major 17 Sustainable Development Goals are, we know that no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and the 17th, the last Sustainable Development Goal is partnership for the goals. See, all these goals are interlinked and I have mentioned that the global human development issues or the problems, global problems are interlinked, and all human beings are facing these problems, and these 17 sustainable development goals are developed on the basis of that basic principle. And it also, if we follow the strict policies and indicators, we can see that we should develop, or we can protect the environmental resources, that's the natural resources, as well as the human being. So the in the COVID-19 pandemic situation, there is a report published by, that is the Sustainable Development Goals and COVID-19 in the global level, that is the Sustainable Development Report 2020. So in that report, they have mentioned the outcome of 17 Sustainable Development Goal during the pandemic situation, or the I think the report is published in 2020 in February or March, and that report mentioned the initial, it covers the initial situation of the pandemic, and the changes in the short-term impact of COVID-19 is mentioned in this column. So in the case of no poverty, that is the first Sustainable Development Goal, the impact of COVID-19 is highly negative. That's also followed in the case of zero hunger, the second Sustainable Development Goal, good health and well-being, that is highly, these three shows highly negative cases. And the mixed trend is shown in the case of mixed or moderately negative impact is shown in the case of quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy. And one more thing is this one, industry, innovation and infrastructure. So in the case of decent work and economic growth, which also shows a highly negative impact. Then the other highly negative impact is shown in the case of reduced inequalities. The impact is still unclear. That means we couldn't calculate properly in the case of responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water and life on land. Again, in the case of sustainable cities and communities, peace, justice, strong institution, partnership for goals, we are gone through a situation of mixed or moderately negative impact. So these are the global perspective or overall effects of COVID-19. It's only a short-term, shows only short-term impacts. So that report also suggests a transformation framework. It consists of 6 major transformation aspects for the Sustainable Development Goals that can be very useful guide for rebuilding the whole system. I think it's useful for the important policies or decision making. So we may start with the ideology, leave no one behind. So the first transformation is related to education, gender and inequality. Second transformation is related to health, well-being and demography. Third one is related to energy, decarbonization and sustainable industry. So then fourth one, sustainable food, land, water and ocean. Fifth one is related to sustainable cities and communities. Sixth one is related to digital revolution for sustainable development. I think in order to substantiate a paragraph answer or a question related to general aspects related to any concepts, you may use these framework to substantiate your answer for a particular question. So for example, in the case of the transformation 1, that is education, gender and inequality, that report clearly mentioned about the rebuilding aspects in which area we should focus. The 5 major areas under the education, gender and inequality are: expand and strengthen public social security system best suited to address the consequences of disruptive events. Further investment in STEM education, digital skills, equity and lifelong learning. And third one is related to further streamline basic health prevention measures in school programs, example hand washing, and provide adequate supply for good hygiene. place women's needs and leadership at the heart of the response to the health and the economic crisis. So these are the major decision making aspects related to education, gender and inequality. Then the transformation 2 aspects is related to health, well-being and demography. Maybe we can use even in the context of in India and in the case of Kerala also we can use some of these measures. Strengthen the role of public health and disease prevention and surveillance both for the communicable and chronic diseases. Increase the role of public authorities in the research for treatment and vaccines and in providing access to treatment and vaccines. Accelerate efforts to achieve universal health care, which is we already started that concept in the case of healthcare aspects. Strengthen public health emergency preparedness. Reduce dependence on other countries for key health supplies and equipment, which may increase the cost of the public healthcare system. Expand digital health solutions to reduce the burden on hospitals and increase access to care. Increase the quality and timelines of health status. Increase the resilience of health system to respond shock or crisis. Then let's move to the third transformation, that is energy decarbonization and sustainable industry. So the major decision making aspects are related to use the Paris climate agreements as the vision for long term change and to inform investment plans and values. Build on positive short-term prospects due to plummeting in industrial output and further the roll out of digital services and e-commerce to accelerate the transition to climate neutrality. Reduce international dependence for key industries and sectors in case of major disruptive events. Example for protective mask, food supply, etc. Pursue efforts to enforce environmental treaties and national regulations despite the lockdown and economic turmoil. Transformation 4 is related to sustainable food, land, water and oceans. In this case, we can strengthen the food security and hygiene, including the reduction of risk of zoonotic diseases. Emphasize the resilience and sustainability of food system. Accelerate efforts to provide universal access to water and sanitation and increase focus on hygiene and hand washing to help curb transmission of oral or fecal diseases. Pursue efforts to reduce negative impacts on biodiversity and ecosystem to prevent future pandemics. The transformation 5 is related to sustainable cities and communities. So in this case aspects, the major decision making aspects are related to address the threats related to vulnerable groups in urban settlements, that is homeless cases, refugees, to avoid deep worsening of their living condition and to make confinement measures more effective. Strengthen the territorial distribution of doctors and availability of care, including in rural areas. Further integrate vulnerable groups in urban settlements, including homeless people, refugees and migrants. Adapt public transportation systems to the need for physical distancing and hygiene and to changing patterns in working and commuting habits. Develop integrated territorial strategies to address the impact of travel restrictions on business, exports and tourism activities. The last transformation is related to harnessing the digital revolution for sustainable development. So the decisions are related to digital health solution to reduce the burden on hospitals and increase access. Develop and use online education tools. Further development of other digital government services and e-commerce. Further investment in STEMs, digital skills, equity and lifelong learning. It's also already come under the category of education. Accelerate the adoption of measures that support a fair transition for workers affected by the digital and technological revolution. So these are the major decisions we can taken during the pandemic period related to the sustainable development goals or the sustainable development aspects. So In order to assess the overall performance of the Sustainable Development Goals, the global rank of the Sustainable Development is, in the case of India, is 117 out of the 166 countries. This data is taken from the Sustainable Development Goals and COVID-19, that is the Sustainable Development Report 2020. So in that case, the India score is 61.9. So what are the plus points and what are the negative points related to the Sustainable Development Goals in the context of India? The trend shows like that. The green color shows, that is the upward arrow shows, the Sustainable Development Goals are on track or maintaining the Sustainable Development Goal achievement. The red color, that is the downward arrow, shows the decreasing trend. The yellow color shows moderately or improving situation, and the orange color shows the stagnating aspects. So from the based on that color and arrow mark, we can say that the green color, that is the no poverty, clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, and climate action. So in these four cases, the trend in the context of India, we are on the right track, or we are maintaining the Sustainable Development Goal achievement. But in the case of the red color, that is life on land, which shows a decreasing trend. Whereas in the case of this orange color, that is in the case of sustainable cities and communities, quality education, gender equality, and life below water. So, and then again peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnership for the goals. In these cases, that in the case of 6 cases, there is we can see a stagnant situation, particularly during the last 5 years, based on the last 5 years data. But in the case of zero hunger, good health and well-being, clean energy, then industry, innovation, and infrastructure, we moderately improving during the last 5 years. So these are the overall performance of the Sustainable Development Goals in India during the last 5 years. They have used the majority of the data is related to last 5 years. In some cases, they use the last maybe some are continuous data. They use last 7 or 8 years data. So this is the current situation related to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So let's move to the in the Indian context, the current situation and the Sustainable Development Goals. So based on the pandemic situation and the lockdown and the slowdown leads to economic breakdown, which we can see that around more than 500 million people falling into poverty. There is a drop in the world output about 32%, and the situation is a very in unstable financial crisis, and that crisis is the intensity of that crisis is greater than the crisis we faced in the 1936 General Depression, and about 5.2% contraction in global GDP in 2020. And after the COVID situation, there is 30% more poor will be created in urban areas. So these are the study report. Then in the case of COVID-19 and environmental status, because we have focused on the environmental protection and sustainable development. So in the case of COVID-19, the Indian economy faces both, it has both the direct and indirect effects and the positive and negative effects. So in the context of India, which are the positive effects? We can see almost, we can compare the reports of the international with the Indian context also. So the international perspective shows that there is a reduction in greenhouse gases, that is there, which leads to air pollution. So we know that about 8% of death in the world is due to greenhouse gas emissions or due to air pollution. So due to COVID-19, report shows that GHG emission is declined. So the pollution in some of the epic centers, that is Wuhan, Italy, Spain, and USA, etc., has reduced up to 30%. There is the reported cases like clean beaches, reduction in environmental noises. All these are come under the cases of positive aspects, but the negative aspects shows that due to COVID-19 and the lockdown leads to suspended recycling unit, which leads to reduction in the recycling of waste, particularly plastic waste and other electronic waste. So there is a huge increase in the plastic waste and other medical waste. Then use of disinfectants, that is sanitizer, water purification, use of bleaching powder, etc., which leads to, that means we know that why environmental pollution, a huge environmental pollution is due to the use of fertilizer or chemical pesticides, and all these sanitizer and all other purification we know that related to chemical aspects, and which also negatively affected the environmental system. And another one is related to global finance and the CSR. The CSR provision is requires affected companies to spend at least 2% of their average net profits made in the preceding 3 years on CSR. CSR is the corporate social responsibility of each company. But due to the reduction in the production and the overall profit, there is also a reduction in the corporate social responsibility, the amount mobilized for the corporate social responsibility. So these are the negative environmental aspects. So why we say that a reduction in the corporate social responsibility leads to reduction in the environmental status means usually there is a component in the corporate social responsibility as environmental component. That means they can spend that amount to protect the natural resources. So overall reduction in the corporate social responsibility means there is a compulsory reduction in the environmental related aspects. So the allocation of fund is declining. So that means the domestic waste and hospital waste and other whole type of waste are increasing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So from these two aspects we can see that there are some positive aspects and some negative aspects. So whether it is a sustainable or these positive aspects is a sustainable concept or not. So the decreasing GHG emission, that means greenhouse gas emission concentration during a short period is not a sustainable way to clean up our environment. There is indirect positive effects. These indirect positive effects are very short duration period effects or temporary in nature. So when we compare the indirect positive effects with the negative effects, we can see that the indirect negative effects persist more than that of the indirect positive effects. So the net result is an unsustainable situation, or this sustainability is only in a short period situation. So I would like to mention one of the conference related to the environmental protection that happened in 1972. I have already mentioned the two conventions. So this Stockholm Conference, that is 1972, was one of the initial steps towards putting environmental concerns on the global agenda. It resulted in the Stockholm Declaration, which contained principles and action plan with a recommendation for environmental policy. Subsequently, a number of multilateral environmental agreements came into practice. Complementing national legislation and bilateral or regional agreements, multilateral environmental agreements form the overarching international legal basis for global efforts to address particular environmental issues. So, this Stockholm Conference in 1972 stresses the need for environmental protection, and as a result, that as a part of that declaration, we have developed a lot of principles and policies in the national and international agenda, and we are implementing it in the different countries in a compulsory manner. So these are the basic aspects or overall aspects related to the topic environmental protection and sustainable development. So in order to justify your answers, for the particular question, see, try to study the definitions, particularly the concepts, then move to the issues related to environment, then what are the issues, how we can develop a sustainable policy. See, in order to develop a particular policy, try to justify that based on the basic principles. Maybe you can use the same principles, fairness, finitude and fragility concepts. Then move on to the your own arguments or establish your own arguments based on the current situation. You can use all these principles in 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Even though I have focused on the concept environmental protection, that's one of the aspects in the syllabus. In order to substantiate your answers, you can use the Sustainable Development indices in the Indian context, and also you can use compare it with the Kerala context, because in the case of gender equality and other educational aspects, the Sustainable Development Index is very high, or the gender equality index is very high compared to the national average. Maybe you can compare with the Kerala context also in that case. Then substantiate your answer with the data and principles. Thank you all.